animal pathology. Laboratory animal pathology, and this is one of the very important part of the veterinary science, because you see all the drugs, all the treatment protocol have some or the at some or the other point have been uh, tested on the laboratory animals. Hmm? And therefore, this knowledge of laboratory animal pathology is very important. Hmm? There are numerous breeds of different laboratory animals, and different types of laboratory animals. Just a second. And this field of laboratory animal pathology is actually very important, and one of the best highest paying jobs in private sector is in this field of laboratory animal pathology, or I should say laboratory animal disease and management. So, like domesticated animals, some introduction about the basic things. What we how do we keep laboratory animals? Laboratory animals are commonly rodents. Okay, different species of rodents are there, and some other species are also there, like rabbits are there. Even dogs and monkeys are laboratory animals. Okay, primates we call them. So, although there are some restrictions in India regarding use of different species as laboratory animals, but small rodents like rat, mice, hamsters, guinea pigs are very commonly used as a model for experimentation. So, there are some parts of these, I should say, the laboratory animal management and how the diseases develop. Like we keep domestic animals um, in sheds, domestic animal sheds. There will be proper poultry house or piggery, or cow shed. Likewise, we always keep, or the laboratory animals are kept in a separate laboratory animal house. Okay, they are always kept in separate laboratory animal house, depending on the size of animal and its natural habitat. They are kept in small cages or some larger cages. Okay, most species of laboratory animals still retain some or the other wild characteristics. Okay, so they have to be kept like we keep domestic animals on in a shed with a bedding of litter material. Same way, lab animals are also kept on a bedding of litter material. Hmm? And then what feed and water we give is generally sterilized. At least for upkeep, we have to give the balanced feed to them, and this is given as pellets, or it is generally for rat and mice, it is given as pellets, or sometimes even as the powder mash, or like greens also. Those animals which are under experimentation, we cannot afford to introduce disease from outside. So they are many times fed with the sterilized feed that has been autoclaved, or feed that has been cooked. Water is used like what we use for human consumption. Water is also used like what we use for human consumption up to that quality. Even I know some laboratories where they actually do not give any other water except for packaged bottled water like Bisleri, etc. Like that, they keep the animals safe from introduction of diseases. The cages are also sterilized regularly. The litter material is also sterilized. And the laboratory animal house in good laboratories, where they are very serious about everything, They even do not allow the direct airflow inside. They have air filters. They have air filters, and these laboratory animals remain in a air conditioned room, with air filters. Although this concept is also applied in some poultries and even in some other domestic animal houses, even in India, some parts are there where the cattle shed, big dairies in Maharashtra and southern India, they have, even in Haryana now, Haryana and Punjab, that they do not, in the dairy house, in poultry house, they do not allow the direct airflow. They will always use air filters. Hmm? So these are the basic managemental practices which are practiced to or applied to reduce the introduction of pathogen by feed, water, litter in the premises and through the air. Why such paranoid behavior? Because uh, you understand this, the pharma industry and the biological research, they have millions and billions of dollars of investment. So one single mistake in protocol can delay the introduction of drugs by months, years, and even decades. Even a wrong interpretation can lead to discard of a molecule which can be very useful, It has happened in past. Some incidences are there that some very useful molecules were discarded because of wrong results. And again experiment, even the positive results are coming, still they are again introduced to the experimentation in different laboratory animal species, huh? So the chance of error remains very less. Therefore, whatever the point, please listen very carefully. What point I want to convey here is that we should be sure that the disease or effect or pathological change what we are seeing in an experiment should be actually because of the treatment protocol or experimental protocol. This effect should not be there because of the, say, the concurrent disease or contamination of clostridial spores or introduction of some bacteria through litter material or any other disease. Okay, so this has to be very much kept in mind, that until and unless we are very sure that there is no other interference from outside, the experimentation cannot be considered successful. Hmm? Because these diseases will have their own effect, will have their own pathogenesis and divert the data what we are getting. So first important point was management. Management should be very sure, very strict. Use of sterilized feed, use of sterilized litter material, the use of air filters, keeping the laboratory animal house premises totally clean. During the experimentation, they are kept in a sterile chamber where nothing is allowed inside except for filtered air. Okay. So likewise, we keep them. Another point is about the breeding of the laboratory animals. Most species, especially in rats and mice, in hamsters and guinea pigs, also this is practiced, but maximum in rats and mice, that they have bred some inbred lines, like bulb sea mice is there, nude mice is there. Okay, these mice, they suffer from inbreeding depression, and they cannot survive outside in the nature, not even for few days. They will be definitely dying out because of infection or other reason. Like some mice species are there which are bred in such a way that they inherently have tendency to develop tumors. They have inherent tendency to develop tumors. Why? Because what is the use of such a mice? Because when we are exposing them to a carcinogen, they immediately start showing carcinogenesis. They immediately start showing tumor development. Okay. While a wild species, a natural species, will resist this tumor development for a very long time. A very long time they will have, they may or may not have tumors. Actually, I have personally seen this. That after 8 or 9 months of direct exposure to carcinogen, also the laboratory animals were not developing the tumors. I have seen this in field. Okay, so such inbred lines have been developed, which have the special deficiency in their body system, like tendency to develop tumor, like lack of say B lymphocyte, lack of T lymphocyte, only natural killer cells are there, no other type of WBC are present. Likewise, they have been inbred to have such kind of characteristics where the associated experimentations can be done. Further, the mice with minimum anti, or I should say immunity, minimum immunity accept the transgenic graft or heterogeneous graft easily in their bodies. So if suppose if I introduce the human blood into mice, and mice is not killing it, it is holding on to the blood, human blood. Okay, and now I conduct the experimentation of dengue virus. What is the pathology of dengue virus in the human blood inside the mice? Isn't it? So likewise, different protocols have been developed to not I should not say protocol. Likewise, different inbred lines of different laboratory animals have been developed, and accordingly, specific protocols are there to conduct experimentation on them. They have specific protocol, and one of the important part is they should not have any disease. External exposure should be minimum, means bare minimum. So understanding of this laboratory animal disease fetches great importance to veterinarians in the field. Okay, so keeping this in mind, we will start with some laboratory animal diseases. Okay, we'll start discussing the laboratory animal. Acha, in can anybody please respond? In Jhaluki, any class of laboratory animal disease has been taken or not? Any introductory class or any disease has been taught? Anyone from Jhaluki can please respond? Yes, please. No. Am I audible or not?
Yes, sir.
Anyone from Jhaluki can respond, please? Anybody from Jhaluki is there or not?
Yes, sir.
Can you please tell me any class of laboratory animal disease or any introductory class was taken?
No,
Simple
sir.
yes or no.
No, sir.
No. Yes or no? I could not hear actually properly.
No, no, sir. No.
No, no. All right, all right, all right. Okay. So, just discussing about the uh, what we have here in the syllabus are uh, different diseases of laboratory animal, the bacterial diseases, viral diseases, and some of the managemental diseases are also there. Okay, and many diseases are actually coinciding by name. They coincide with the domestic animal disease, but they have separate pathogenesis. So first disease we start with is Tyzer's disease. Tyzer apostrophe S. Tyzer's disease. Tyzer's disease. This disease was first described by Dr. Ernest E. Tyzer. Tyzzer. Dr. Ernest E. Tyzer, and in the year 1917. 1917 in Japanese waltzing mouse. Waltz is a dance actually. If I'm not wrong, it's a Belgian dance. Huh? Waltz. WALTZING, waltzing mouse. Japanese waltzing mouse. Waltzing is a behavior. They it seems they tend to dance. Okay, it's a behavior. So it was first described by Dr. Ernest E. Tizer in 1917 during an experimentation, and it was seen in the species Japanese waltzing mouse, although it is seen in many other species. This, according to the susceptibility, Tizer's disease has been described in rats, dogs, cats, cattle, pigs, monkeys, horse, jabrils, and even immunosuppressed human beings. So nobody is going to ask you this much, but those species where it is important, I'm going to anyways discuss them, laboratory animal species. But numerous species have been found to get affected by this, and the list is ever increasing. List keeps on increasing. And I have seen this original paper written by Dr. Tizer. This what he wrote is still relevant. He described this disease in such detail that the details still hold relevant. In fact, during my preparation of this chapter, I have never found anything too much higher than what he already has described in 1970. More than 100 years back, he could describe it so much detail. Okay. So the etiology of this disease, earlier the bacteria was called as Bacillus piliformis. Bacillus piliformis. Even Dr. Tizer, in fact, could understand that it was a spore-bearing bacillus, Bacillus piliformis. But in the modern classification, it is now called as Clostridium piliforme. Clostridium piliforme. Please underline this. Remember Clostridium piliforme, but don't confuse if somebody mentions, some book mentions by Bacillus piliformis. Okay. And this disease was described with a triad of lesions. 3 different types of lesions were described in this disease. Triad of lesions in the mice, where it was enterocolitis, necrotic hepatitis, and carditis. Enterocolitis, necrotic hepatitis, and carditis. So disease keeps on gathering more and more information. New and new species are being discovered to get affected by this, typically by the immunosuppression. This Clostridium piliforme is a bacillus, gram-positive bacillus. It is spore former. It's a spore former, and it has flagella, peritrichous flagella. Peritrichous flagella is there. And this bacteria is very peculiar because it is a Clostridia which cannot be cultured on cell-free media. We cannot culture this bacteria in vitro. So characterization is very difficult. We can only culture it on the chicken egg embryo, or embryonic chicken egg, or in cell culture, or in the host. Otherwise, outside it is very difficult. It has not been cultured till now. So we discussed some predisposing factors. Why a colony of laboratory animals get predisposed to this disease. Now, most predisposing factors will be repeated later on in most diseases. So once I discuss it here, keep it common for others. Most points will be common for others. So Clostridial spores are present everywhere. Until and unless the rat, mice, rabbit, they are kept in a sterile environment, being fed with autoclaved feed and kept on autoclaved this litter material, even autoclaved cages, है ना, sterile cages, and with no direct airflow, there is always chance of spore contamination. You believe it? Clostridia spore will be there until unless we block out the air. Clostridia spore will gain entry anyhow. So any stressful condition will trigger the disease uh, in a laboratory animal house with weaker biosecurity. For example, the major stressful conditions, common stressful conditions include overcrowding, overcrowding, capturing and frequent, I should say, mishandling by wild capture, or too much handling, mishandling while capture, or too much handling, transportation, transportation, weaning is one of the major cause of stress in all animals, domestic animals also, laboratory animals. Weaning, then sudden change in feed, sudden change in feed. In my own laboratory animal practice, or I should say the rodent practice, whenever I have treated any disease, even recently I have come across some cases of rodent disease. Every time there will be some history of there will be some history of the sudden change of feed, sudden change in diet. Hmm? The digestive system of rodents is very weak, especially laboratory rodents. They cannot sustain the sudden change in type of feed, especially concentrate ration, which sudden growth of bacteria, etc., will be there. Okay. Now, see, if you go for traveling for, say, All India tour or this tour, that tour, okay, and you get exposed to the different types of food, you don't get the food of your own choice, huh? So you get too much of maida roti and this, that, and that too. I don't know what quality, quantity, type of oil, everything. Suddenly, some or the other level of stomach upset will be there, huh? Isn't it? So, but laboratory animal, they are very susceptible. Sudden change in type of carbohydrate, sudden change in excess carbohydrate, sudden introduction of any new protein source, even introduction of excessive or hard roughage. Excess or hard roughage itself is a intestinal stress source. All right. So sudden change in diet, mostly the concentrate, but also roughages, very fibrous roughages also do that, and they lead to change in intestinal microflora. They lead to change in intestinal microflora, and because of that, the pathogenic intestinal bacteria start growing, and one of them is Clostridium piliforme. Okay, one of the important one is Clostridium piliforme. They start growing and invade the intestine. So in such case, if you ask me, I have seen the use of probiotics. Probiotics very useful in treating such cases actually. Huh? So, anyways, that is a treatment aspect. So, what it does actually, it changes the intestinal microflora, and harmful bacteria start growing. Then overall, poor hygiene and weak biosecurity itself makes the rodent susceptible to disease. We keep on introducing the new and new diseases, and there is a concept of pathogen load. We have to understand the concept of pathogen load. The concept of pathogen load is that why we are wearing masks to prevent ourselves from corona. Can mask prevent the virus from entering the respiratory tract? No, it cannot prevent. It will definitely allow the virus to go inside. But the point is, body can handle few particles of virus. Say 50-60 particles of virus can be handled, no doubt. And that too in the nose or upper respiratory tract, they can be handled well. But say a million virus particles are inhaled by a person continuously, directly entering the lungs continuously for say 30 minutes, for half an hour, for 10 minutes, 5 minutes also. continuous. Then what happens? The high pathogen load develops inside the lungs. Such a person develops a severe disease, and the person wearing mask, even getting exposed, may not develop any symptom because virus remains in the nose. So this is the concept of pathogen load on the target side. Poor biosecurity, weak biosecurity increases the exposure. Not no doubt, exposure is there, but it also leads to increase in the pathogen load on the animal body. Okay, so immune system is overwhelmed. The animal suffers from disease. Okay, so these are the common: the poor hygiene, poor biosecurity, overcrowding, use of antibiotics, continuous use of antibiotics is one of the major reasons for immunosuppression. Uh, Toxicity, unknown toxins are present, say mycotoxins are present. Hmm? Malnutrition and deficiency. Pregnancy, physiological status, pregnancy itself can lead to immunosuppression. So all these are natural causes, or I should say managemental and natural causes of immunosuppression and stress. Immunosuppression and I should say stress and immunosuppression. Stress and immunosuppression. Okay. While if the bacteria is present subclinically in the animal body, during the experimentation, Tyser disease develops. Suppose the experimentation involves use of corticosteroids, or use of radiation, or use of a chemical that causes poor immunity, that leads to immunosuppression, and in such case the Tyser disease develops. Or not only Tyser disease, please remember the worst part. क्लास में Hey, can you hear me still?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So one of the worst effect of this laboratory animal disease is there remains subclinical because of poor biosecurity, poor management, and everything. The etiology is hidden inside the animal body, and while the experimentation is going on, they start coming up because of immunosuppression, because of disturbance and everything. So not only Tyser disease, other disease also show this. Salmonella also shows this, है ना? और वो the uh, say the Katsharai, that all will show this. Okay, so one thing is that to be kept in mind, that whether this disease is going to affect the experimentation or not. Oh yes, definitely it does. And that is why all this paranoid biosecurity is applied to laboratory animal house. Another factor is concurrent viral infections. Concurrent viral infections, especially the rodent viruses, they are highly immunosuppressive. And they may lead to the development of such diseases. Okay. Then transmission. Just few comments about transmission, and then we will conclude this class. From next class onwards, we will go in a better speed and try to cover some diseases, because Tyser disease is a model disease. You understand Tyser disease. Very few points of immunosuppression mismanagement. Again, I don't have to explain. Okay. So next class onwards, we can go a little bit faster. So transmission. So transmission is uh, by direct contact between the infected animals, by ingestion of the vegetative spores between the animals, infected colony. See, the word colony is there. A laboratory animal colony. Okay, where they are residing, they are together they have their hierarchy, everything. That is called as laboratory animal colony. In the colony, it is there. And apart from this, new introduction is by spores. New introduction is by spores. Spores are very common, very frequently found, and this bacteria enters by oral route, especially contaminated feed, water, litter, feed, water, and litter, and then laboratory animal house workers, fomites, laboratory animal house workers, fomites, cages, infected laboratory animal houses, rodents, insects, all can spread these spores. Even by air, these spores can be spread out. You can understand this. Why we keep the air filters that there. So likewise, the it is very easy to contaminate uh, a laboratory animal house with the spores of Clostridium filiforme. Okay. There is no talk about a reservoir host till now, but yes, there are subclinically infected animals. Any rodent, anyone can be subclinically infected. Okay, and they can act as the source of infection for other healthy animals. Okay, there are reports of transplacental transmission of this bacteria also. Okay, in guinea pigs and rabbits. In guinea pigs and rabbits, it has been found to be transmitted vertically. But what is the role of this vertical transmission in nature and epidemiology of this disease is still not clear. It is still not clear. Okay. So the other part, pathogenesis, etc., we will proceed later next week. Today, because of so many disturbances and some this problem with the software, things could not proceed the way I wanted. Anyways, next class onwards, we will go fast and more clear. Any doubt till now? Anything you want to discuss or ask? Pfizer's disease, and we have seen that it is a clostridial disease, Clostridium filiforme, first described by Dr. Ernest Teiser. And we discussed in detail about the biosecurity associated with the laboratory animal diseases. Why this particular disease, Teiser's disease, is very relevant for or I should say a model or a prototype to understand the impact of the biosecurity in case of laboratory animal house is that this is a clostridial disease and it is spread by spores. Yes, it can be contact through exposure to the vegetative forms of the bacilli in close contact, but definitely the longer range or widespread contamination and spread of disease is by the spores. So, if we can prevent a disease like Teiser's disease from entering a laboratory animal house or a colony, then definitely other diseases will also be excluded out. So that is why we have seen that the disease entry point to a laboratory animal house are through the air, through the feed, water, the litter material what we use, then the farm workers, yes, and also the carrier animals. Carrier animals, whether the laboratory animal itself or a rodent or a fly or any other animal that has the access, direct or indirect access to the laboratory animal house. All these factors, all these points are relevant for domestic animals also. Yes, but definitely in laboratory animal practice, the the chances of exposure of such diseases, or I should say the occurrence of such disease, is more because what we use the laboratory animals for, we use them for experimentation. Experimentation involves exposure to chemicals or different kinds of treatments, say radiation, or any other kind of drug or anything. And many times these kind of challenges lead to immunosuppression. And therefore, if say there is hidden Tyzer's disease, it will immediately become clinical. Okay. And consequently, the experimental data, what we wanted about, say, a chemical treatment or a, or a procedure or a drug, goes irrelevant now, because the pathology of this disease will interfere with the pure lesions found by such a treatment. So consequently, they have also developed they have also developed, not means they have also developed protocols for use of the specific pathogen free animals, which do not carry any kind of disease. hmm. Although although there is a problem with specific pathogen-free animals, laboratory animals, is that in natural cases, the animals will always have the infection of, or I should say, commensal or natural presence of some bacteria, and they do play a role in the normal pathogenesis of a disease. When we are using specific pathogen-free animals, their innate immunity is weak. They do not have bacteria inside them to have role in that. Their response to the chemical treatment or the any other kind of experimental treatment is very different from a natural animal. Although that data remains relevant, but definitely not I should say applicable in field all the time. Okay, so consequently, having healthy, disease-free, naturally kept laboratory animals are far better than SPF animal to find out the relevant data. Okay, no doubt, SPF animals, they also have their own specific pathogen-free animals. They also have their own relevance. No doubt, they also have it. So. Then we have discussed whether one point is that how the infection reaches a laboratory animal house. Then another aspect was how this hidden infection becomes clinical. So there is immunosuppression because of concurrent viral infections. There is malnutrition, deficiency diseases, of course. There is overcrowding in the farm, which leads to scratching and other kind of injuries and stress, fighting, etc. Then there is mismanagement. Suppose the litter is damp, ventilation is poor. Now, at one point we say that there should not be stray entry of air. At another hand, we say that ventilation should be good. These two things have to be kept in mind very properly. There are some important managemental steps we have to take to improve the ventilation as well as reduce the entry of stray air or contaminated air. So ventilation can be poor, and likewise, so many mismanagement points can also altogether these lead to stress and break in immunity. One common example was sudden change in feed, or sudden use of very rough feed, or sudden use of new concentrate feed or excessive concentrate feed. Both these, too rough feed or sudden change or excessive use of concentrates, both lead to digestive disturbances, and they have been very commonly related with the the diseases which begin from intestine, like the Tyzer's disease. Okay, so keeping all these points, we go ahead with the pathogenesis. as some students who have noted down or studied properly, um, Pfizer's disease has been reported to have natural transplacental transmission in guinea pigs and rabbits. Although not very common, but it has been found that this disease can be transmitted from guinea pigs and rabbits from the mother to the offspring. We go ahead with the pathogenesis. So first important point is that this Clostridium filiforme has affinity towards the intestinal epithelial cells. They have affinity towards the intestinal epithelial cells, intestinal smooth muscle cells, liver cells, and cardiac myocytes. Liver cells and cardiac myocytes. It is not necessary all these parts may show development of lesions, but depending on the immunity status or virulence, all these can be affected. In natural conditions, this disease has been experimentally studied a lot. They have injected the spores and vegetative forms. They have uh, inoculated intracerebrally also. So many experiments have been done. If you refer the literature available on this disease, there is so much you can see. But what we talk about is natural conditions. In natural condition, the infection begins by oral ingestion, oral contamination by spores, or vegetative forms if the colony is having a shedder animal, which is shedding the disease, shedding the vegetative forms. And then there is primary establishment of infection in the lower intestines. In lower intestines, the infection begins. This intestinal infection results into mild to severe pathogenesis or mild to severe pathology. And so we may have the ileitis, typhlitis, and colitis. Ileitis, typhlitis, and colitis of different intensity, variable intensity. It may be very severe to mild. It then spreads to liver. From here, through the help of lacteals, especially the lymph vessels, and of course also the blood vessels supplying to the liver, the portal blood vessels, lacteals and portal blood vessels, then supply these bacteria to liver, especially heart also, and even to other parts. But because this is having affinity towards liver and heart, maximum lesions are seen in this part of the body. The bacteria spread to liver and heart, leading to hepatitis and myocarditis. The bacteria is intracellular pathogen. One important, very important point, that this bacteria is obligate parasite and it resides inside the affected cells, intracellular pathogen. And where this bacteria, those cells where it is proliferating, those cells become dead, and bacteria next infects the surrounding cells. And consequently, the bacterial infection part is a necrotic area where only the peripheral viable cells show presence of live bacteria. The necrotic area is dead now. No bacteria grows in that. Bacteria can be found in a lesion only in the peripheral viable cells, alive cells. So once the bacteria infect the organ, there is necrosis and the spread of necrosis as the bacteria keeps on infecting the surrounding cells. A point comes where the inflammation in the organ restricts the spread of bacteria. Inflammation of the organ restricts the spread of the the bacterial necrosis in that organ. So therefore, a circumscribed lesions may form. Circumscribed lesions may form. If I say the description of pathology, then there are three important points. Three important points. First is enteritis, then hepatitis, necrotic hepatitis, and then there is myocarditis. Myocarditis. The uh, the clinical observations in the mice. First, we start with the mice because this is the prototype species where this disease has been studied. More or less, the pathology is same in all animals. The clinical observations include uh, that in an affected colony, the uh, the disease runs an acute course, and so within a week or few days, the animals start showing emaciation and loss of condition. Emaciation and loss of condition. All age groups of mice are affected, but younger ones are showing more severe lesions and more severe disease and higher mortality. All age groups are affected, but young ones are more severely affected, even with higher mortality. Now, in some cases, some colonies where the exposure is very high, if exposure to bacteria is very high, spores is very high, the first clinical observation is sudden death in mice. First clinical observation may be sudden death or peracute death in the mice. And then the surviving ones start showing clinical signs of the emaciation, the rough hair coat, depression, some diarrhea. It has all appear later on. In cases where there is extensive pathogen load. The mice also show wet feces sticking around the tail and hindquarters, indicating diarrhea. Wet feces sticking around tail and hindquarters, indicating diarrhea. Hmm. The animals are dehydrated. Animals are dehydrated. Hmm. And the young and weaned mice are called as weanlings. Wean, young and weanling mouse may show 100% mortality at this case. And some mice which are surviving with extensive liver damage may start showing jaundice. But this is a rare finding. This is a rare finding. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, all right.
Yes, sir.
Any doubt till now? Anything you want to ask? Confusion? Anything? Okay, let's go ahead. The necropsy findings in mice are very characteristic. The lesions of this disease are more or less consistent in most of the animals that will die. They reveal almost very similar necropsy findings. There is there is mild to moderate ileitis, typhlitis, and colitis. I'm saying mild to moderate. I'm not saying severe. Okay. Depending on the species, the intestinal lesions, liver lesions, and even heart lesions vary. In mice, the intestinal lesions are remarkable but not very severe. Okay. Mild to moderate ileitis, typhlitis, and colitis. The intestinal inflammation can appear without even showing any lesions in the liver. The liver may not be affected in some of the mice. Worst affected part in intestine is cecum, and including the ileocecal valve. Ileocecal valve is the junction of ileum and cecum, from where the communication with the main flow of intestine is made with the ceca. The affected parts of intestine may or may not show remarkable changes, but if observed, the lesions are appearing as congestion of the affected part with presence of liquid, that is fluid, to mucoid content in the intestine. Fluid to mucoid content in the intestine. Hmm? When some animals show very severe, some animals show very severe inflammation, then only hemorrhages and necrotic foci may be seen. Then only hemorrhages and necrotic foci are seen. Otherwise, generally it is mild to moderate. This necrotic foci can go deep up to the tunica muscularis. Can go deep up to the tunica muscularis. The most characteristic lesions which are important for diagnosis of this disease are seen in liver. Once again, I say there may not be always that liver is affected, but yes, liver shows the maximum characteristic lesions, which are variable sized necrotic foci. Variable sized necrotic foci, which may be very few in number, or numerous, multiple on the liver. Very few in number, even singular here and there, one or two, but too numerous on the liver. Their color is pale grayish white. Color is pale grayish white to slightly yellow. Pale grayish white to slightly yellow. They can be pinpoint size to miliary nodular, up to 2 millimeter in size. They can be of pinpoint size to up to miliary nodular, going up to 2 millimeter diameter. These lesions have consistent. These lesions are more or less firm consistency. Okay, they are not pasty firm consistency, and in later stages, they may have the fibrous connective tissue proliferating in them. They may have fibrous connective tissue proliferating in them. Means in initial stages, they are fiber firm. They can be cut easily. When disease is recovering from the disease, the area may get cirrhotic. Fibrous connective tissue proliferate. When these lesions merge and become large, when these lesions become merged and large, they have inspissated or caseous consistency. Inspissated means dehydrated pus. Inspissated pus means, or I should say, inspissated means dehydrated exudate or dehydrated necrotic debris or dehydrated pus. So inspissated means dehydrated, where the water has been lost. So when they become merged, lesions become large. They have inspissated and caseous consistency. Consistency. And if the lesion is hemorrhage, dark instead of appearing pale grayish white, there is hemorrhage, then the lesion appears dark brown. The heart, there is occasional pale necrotic foci on the myocardium. Heart reveals occasional pale necrotic foci on the myocardium. Histopathological change. Histology is also very much similar. Histopathologies are very typical and are of no significance. Also, hepatic lesions, the necrotic, white necrotic on the liver, they are, which are
Sir, your
clearly
voice is
evident
clear.
with okay. Up to point you could listen to me.
Histopathology up to that.
Okay, just okay. Histopathology of this disease is very characteristic, hmm, and it is of diagnostic significance. That means a histopathological slide may actually confirm disease in the rat mice colony or any other species. Okay. On histopathological analysis of liver lesions, necrosis is very clearly seen. Necrosis is there, and there is infiltration with polymorphonuclear leukocytes. Polymorphonuclear leukocytes means mostly neutrophils. Neutrophils. And there is infiltration with polymorphonuclear leukocytes. The necrotic core is of cellular debris. And the neutrophils, infiltrating the necrotic area. Infiltration is very visible, especially at the periphery of the necrotic area. Periphery of this necrotic area. And this is the zone or line of demarcation between the viable cells and necrotic area. Where there is infiltration of neutrophils maximum, this is the line of demarcation. Another characteristic finding is that these alive cells of alive liver cells have numerous bacteria present inside the cells. Okay, so this line of so there is a central necrotic core surround viable cells. In the viable cells, there are bacteria, and then there is extensive infiltration of the neutrophils, some neutrophils inside the necrotic core. Okay, these affected hepatocytes, reveal the presence of necrotic changes or degenerative changes. That means they are showing changes of cell death. Cell death. Bacteria inside the cells are arranged in very characteristic parallel bundles. Bacteria are arranged inside the hepatocytes in very characteristic parallel bundles. Okay, they are arranged parallelly inside the hepatocytes. Some bacteria are vegetative and some show presence spores also. Some show presence of spores also. Rarely, some bacteria are observed phagocytosed by neutrophils or other inflammatory cells. Rarely, some bacteria also observed phagocytosed by necrotic by the infiltrating neutrophil other inflammatory cells. The lesions are preferably seen around the portal vessels, which indicate hematogenous spread from intestine. The lesions are preferably seen around the portal vessels, which is a strong indicator that there was hematogenous spread of this bacteria. Then the affected part of liver parenchyma, there is still be some generative changes depending on the stage of disease. Maybe changes in affected part. They may start showing cellulitis, associated with the disease development, not affected bacteria. As the lesion progresses, it is contained. The necrotic is regenerated, or if extensive, there is proliferation of fibrous connective tissue. There is regeneration of affected area if it is small, or if it is extensive, then there is formation of fibrous connective tissue leading to liver cirrhosis or cirrhosis in the liver. Focal changes. Focal cirrhotic changes. the older lesions where the capsule formation is taking place, where the bacteria has been contained, there is formation of capsule, fibrous connective tissue capsule initially with presence of mononuclear cells, and this capsulated form later becomes the cirrhotic foci. This capsulated form only later becomes the cirrhotic foci. Very rarely, some bacteria may show hemorrhages also, presence of RBCs which are decaying and degenerating. The Dr. Tice had actually described liver lesions as biliary abscess. Okay, so this description actually stands relevant also because it is having filtration of neutrophil. Lesion is actually biliary abscess. It will be the intestine also, the bacteria is seen intracellular in the epithelium. The effect is variable. It not be very similar, or it may be similar with function of ulceration.
Excuse me, sir, your voice is not clear.
Are is it better now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Sir, can you please explain the histopathology again?
But
Whole part.
Yes, sir, from starting.
what starting? Okay. Histopathology of the types of liver. First, we will discuss the histopathology are seen. What breaking? Yes, I could also. Oh, okay. So what we do now, we listen to class because this will to confusion. All right. We can just suspend this class because I think there is actually some net issues today because of rainy weather. So suspend here itself and resume once again on next. All right, we will continue this. We'll try to be master next time. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.